Do you want to learn how to work with Lightroom? In today's video, I will be explaining how I work with it. Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Orphea and in today's video I'm gonna be showing you how I work with Lightroom. Lightroom is my main picture editing program for the pictures that I take for photo shoots. This is something that I do as a side business and something that I personally really enjoy. I've learned myself how to work with Lightroom. I never followed any classes or did anything school related to it. I followed a few tutorials on Skillshare, a website that I could highly recommend, and then it was just trying out things and starting to work with the program. In today's video, I'm gonna be showing you how I work on a picture from a photo shoot I did with a friend recently. And I will also show you how I export my files in high quality for web use and also in lower quality for web use, because this makes a big difference in how I work with presets. Since we're going to be working with Lightroom today, first thing you do is open Lightroom. And I actually have a fixed version of Lightroom, but if you want a package with Photoshop and Lightroom, you can get it from the Adobe website together as a subscription. Now, as you can see here, my Lightroom opens with all of the files that I have on my computer. But if you need to import files, you go to File, Import Videos and Photos, and then it will go to your PC where you need to select a file that you want to import. So for me, it was the shoot of Lisa and Bieke, two friends of mine. And then you will have, if the things become clear, so for example, if I go to the things I filmed here, you can see that they are not grayed out. So I can import all of these files with just pressing import right now. If you want to import specific files, I would recommend doing uncheck all and then only checking the specific files that you need. I don't need updates, thank you very much. But since I've already imported the files, we're just gonna go to Lightroom. But this is the way that you import files, and then you will get them as you see them right here. Now this is all of the pictures that I took with my shoot of one of my friends. You can already see those two pictures I will not be able to use. I know here we had some trouble with the people driving by, but you can just select the pictures. And something that I personally like to do is to make it easier for me when I go actually edit. So as you can see here, you have the set rating. So what I do if I go through my pictures, if I have a picture that I really like, then I will favorite it. So I give it 5 stars. And that's how I go through all of my pictures. I will just look at them, give them a rating, and then afterwards, when I'm done giving the ratings of the pictures, I can actually select them the way I want to. So if right now I go to develop, which is the part where you will actually be starting to editing the pictures, I will do filter, and then I will say rated. So now I get all of the pictures that are 1 star and higher. If I want to see only the 5 stars and higher, which is what I usually do, I do this. What I will also do, if I have multiple pictures of the same gallery, I will just simply go through it and pick my favorites. Now this one, the bottom shoe is not entirely inside, so I will only give it 3 stars. This one I really like personally. This one is a little bit blurry, so no star. And I will just look, I think this is my favorite, so we're gonna develop this one. So as we are right now, nothing has been done with the picture, it's just been imported into Lightroom. If you shoot with a lens, your lens will have a correction, and all of the corrections that we're gonna do to the picture are here. And this is actually something that I always do first. So I will remove chromatic aberration and I will enable the profile correction. So you can see this pulls my picture straight, and it makes it more flat. So it will correct the roundness that your camera lens gives to the picture. But I personally really like it both ways. For this picture, I'm gonna remove it because I will be applying other effects. Now in this sidebar is where you do everything in regards to editing of your picture. But if you are a starter to Lightroom, it might be easier to start with presets. Presets are, as the name says, presets of pictures. So you can look into the basic ones, and then you also have user presets. Now I give my shoots names, and if you hover over these presets, you will see the effect that it will have on your picture. And regarding how you edited the picture, how you want your picture to look, it will affect it. So as you can see, most of my edits are not really bright edits or colorful edits. I actually really like subtracting color. But for this picture, I think I'm gonna start with a blank canvas. So as you can see here, I just enabled the lens profiles, removed the chromatic aberration. That's it. That's all I did. But because I don't want to be working with presets today, I want to show you how I work on this picture as a base. This is how I'm going to do it. Most people start with the basic tab, but it's not what I'm going to do today. I actually prefer working with the curve, the tone curve. Now what I like to do is I want to set my points. I'm not sure why it's suddenly, yes, okay. So what I like to do is I set a point at the center of the curve, there at the curve, and there at the curve. And this will only slightly affect your picture. Now I don't like my whites to be overly white, so I will always reduce my whites just a tiny bit. And if you slide this thing up and down, you will see that it affects mostly the sky of my picture. The center I leave mostly as it is, and then this one affects the blacks. So if I want my blacks to be really dark, I can pull this down. This will affect the dark areas of the picture, and this will affect the light ones. So I'm gonna make it a tiny bit lighter, but what I can also do is here change the opacity or the darkness of the darks, just as I did for the whites. Now I do like my darks to be very black, but I think actually as is good. So this is the tone curve and how I set it. Then I only go to the basic tab where you can change the temperature of your picture. Now I would not recommend playing with this too much because it can make your picture either very yellow or very blue. If you double click on a slider, it will reset to where it originally was. So if I slide this one around, but I don't like it, I just double click and it goes to as it was. Then we can go play with the exposure. If you've underexposed or overexposed your picture, you can change it here, and also the contrast. So it will make sure that your picture has more or less contrast. Now, I personally think that for this type of picture, I want a little bit more contrast. Now, I have forgotten something very important is cropping your picture. Now, I think that the way a picture looks and the way it's cropped can make a big difference in the feel that it gives. So what I like to do is I go to my crop, and I also go here into the transform tab and I put it up upright auto. What this will do is it will detect lines in your picture and make them straight. So this will make sure that the lines in my picture are very straight. Now I also like to work with a rule of thirds in my pictures. So I always like to have my model on one of the axis of the picture, so one of the lines here. If she is looking this way, I will make sure she's on this axis. If she's looking that way, I will try and have her as close to the other one. I also want to give a little bit of space to the picture. I'm really quickly checking if I don't want to crop it anymore. And by holding the shift, you can actually have this frame just adjust to its true size and not crop too much. Okay, so I think this looks good, so I press enter. And if you ever want to see the before and after of what you've done, you can press Y. So you can see here, before this is what a picture looked like, and this is already what we've done afterwards, so what we have done up to now. Now that we've done the correction, we're gonna go to basic again. So if you don't know what something does, I would recommend sliding it left and right to see really brightly what it does. Now, I don't want my highlights to be too bright, so I'm just going to reduce them a little bit. My shadows are actually pretty dark. So in order to bring out the detail of the clothing that she's wearing, because it's a full black outfit, I'm going to make the shadows a little bit lighter. With the whites, I don't want to keep them too bright. I want to darken them a little bit. And with the blacks, I also want to just keep them as is, or maybe just a little bit lighter, but this is all just personal preference. Then we can go to texture. Texture makes your picture either very textured or very blurry. Now, I don't like playing with this at this point. Clarity will give you more clarity in your picture or make it a lot less. Now, I think I might add just a little bit of clarity for this picture, just a tiny bit. Dehaze. does more or less the same thing. This is especially good if you're working with dark clouds. If you really want to give more contrast to your picture, this might really work well. For this one, I don't think it helps a lot. Then we get to Vibrance. Now, my model has red hair, but you can't really see it right now. If you add Vibrance and saturation to your picture, you will get more colors in it. Now, I'm gonna give the overall saturation a little bit more, the Vibrance a tiny bit as well, but I will edit it out for most of the elements of this picture later. So tone curve we have already done. Then you can go to hue, saturation and luminance of the colors in your picture. And this is how I change how certain colors look in my pictures. Now again, by sliding from left to right, you can see how a color looks in your picture and how changing the sliders will affect it. Again, by double clicking, you reset the slider. So for example, the greens of this will be affected. Now it's the aqua that we're affecting, and we have an overall blue tone on this picture, so that's why it's giving such a big effect on it. And this is all, again, personal preference. If you like your pictures to be very colorful and you want to change the colors in it very much, then go ahead, feel free to do so. With saturation, you will just change the intensity of the colors, and this is actually something that I really like to use. For example, I don't want the greens of this picture to show through too much, so what I will do is I will change the saturation and make it lower. This does not mean that no green will show through, but less green will. Same for the aqua. I don't really want aqua colors in this picture. I want them a little bit, and also with the blue. But if I reduce the blue too much, then I will lose almost all color in my picture. So this is not what I want. I will just slightly reduce it. Then we move on to the purple. And as you can see, there's a car here in the background that has that color, which I personally don't really like. But you can also see that the model's hair is this color. So I'm just gonna leave it as is for now. And then with magenta, I'm also gonna see what it affects in my picture. It doesn't affect much, except the car. I'm not seeing any drastic changes on my model that I don't like. So I'm just gonna reduce it here as well. So what this does is that only the colors that I decide I want to see more will be visible. Then you can change the luminance. You don't really see much happening here for this color. Same with this one, doesn't make a big difference anymore. The yellow. So if you see the yellow there in the center of the screen in the background, you will really see what this does. I'm gonna put it entirely down for the yellow. For green, same, you will see in the background that it makes it either darker or lighter. I'm gonna make them very dark. Here for the aqua tones, I like the sky to be dark. That's just the mood I like going for. And here with the blue, since the overall color in my picture is blue, this makes a drastic change. So I'm just gonna put it on -10 is already a lot, but hey, let's keep it at that. And then with the purple, I like it to be just a little bit darker. And for the magenta, I'm just gonna keep it a little bit lighter. Then you can go to detail. I personally never do this. I barely use this tab. Lens correction we've already done. Transform we've already done. I don't like really using effects and calibration. So the next thing I personally like to do, if necessary, is to look at my picture. You can see that this is a really specific style of edit that I like to do. So you can see that I have played around with the colors. Now this is, for this picture, something that I want, but it could be something that you don't want, so it really depends. But as you can see, the face looks really good. I don't feel like I need to do any corrections of the skin, but that's what you could do with this tool. You can also remove red eyes, and then you can do graduated filters. Now I'm first gonna start with something different. Is the adjustment brush. It's something that I found really tricky to work with at the start, and by just using the scroll wheel of your mouse, you can enlarge or make it smaller. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to paint over my model. You can see it's already applying an effect, but that effect we can change in just a moment. But I want her to stand out more than she currently is. And if you want to see how this affects your picture, you can press O, and then you can see the areas that you've painted red are the areas affected by this filter. If you want to reduce something with the filter, you just go to erase. It will give you an eraser, and that way you can make it more precise and work better around the shapes of your model without affecting too much of the background. And then if you want to go back, then you just go brush A, which is the brush you just used, and you just go over it again. But first what I want to do is I want to decide what I want to affect. Now it doesn't really matter to me which of these I use. I usually go to Soften Skin Light because it gives the most natural effect on skin. So if you want to still change the temperature of your model, you can do so now. So I'm going to add a little bit of warmth to her because right now we took out all of the warmth of this picture, which is the look I'm going for. If you want to change the exposure, you can already do that here as well. I'm just going to do just a tiny bit, just to make her stand out even more. You can up or down the contrast, which I'm not going to touch. The highlights on her look pretty good, so I'm also going to leave it as is. The shadows look good. The whites, I think, could maybe be a little bit brighter. The darks, I'm just going to leave as is. Then we have the texture one. If we reduce it, she will become entirely blurry. If we make it harsher, then she will get really strong lines in her face. So I'm just going to up the texture a teeny tiny bit just to give a little bit more sharpness to her. Clarity has been put way down here and it makes it all softer and brighter. If you put it all the way up, it makes it extremely harsh as well. So what I like to do is just leave it as is. Dehaze will make, in one sense, your picture darker, and in the other sense, make it a lot brighter, almost white even. So I'm just going to leave dehaze as is as well. The saturation, you will make her gray or either more colorful. So I'm going to make her a little bit more colorful, but not a lot. Sharpness will do more sharpening of the facial features. So I'm going to put that a little bit up. Noise, I always leave as is. Moire and defringe, I don't really use. So by this, we've applied one simple adjustment brush and it makes a difference in how the model looks. So if we look at the before and after, you can see that I've made the model stand out a little bit more from the picture. And if you look at the before and the after of the picture, it makes a very big difference already. So if you look here and here, you can see I've added these colors, which give a really special effect to the picture. I've also made sure that she's more bright and stands out more than the background. The next thing that I like to do for this picture is I'm gonna add graduated filters. Now what these do is the same thing as you do with the brush. You can actually just adjust them how you want them. Now again, if you want to see which area is affected by this filter, you can see it this way. Now I want a little bit more exposure here in my picture, so there is some light coming in, but I also don't want it to be too much. Now I'm gonna see what I'm gonna do with the contrast here. I'm also gonna reduce it a little bit, give it a little bit more highlights, a little bit less shadows, a little bit more whites, a little less blacks, a little more intense blacks and intense shadows is what I meant. Texture, I'm not really gonna do much about it. I'm gonna leave it as is. Clarity also, I'm just gonna reduce it a tiny bit. Dehaze, I'm gonna up a little bit so that it appears that there's sunlight shining on my model from that side. Saturation, I'm gonna leave it as is. I think it looks good like this. So if right now I click on this again, you will see the before and after. You see that I really added in this source of light where before there was none to give my model more exposure in the picture. Then what I also like to do is darken the other side. So we're going to go to the same filter, but instead of going up in the exposure, I'm going down in the exposure. Now, if you do this too drastically, you can actually make it black, but that's not what I want. I just want to reduce it a tiny bit, and you can actually drag it around and change the way it's going. I think I'm actually going to be doing it like this, I think, and move it just a little bit more, so that we get this really transition from bright to dark in the picture with my model standing out. What I then like to do is take a radial filter, and this will actually make a circle more or less, or however you shape it. And I like to place this around my model. Now, if you do this really drastically in effect, then you will create a hoop around your model. And I always like to invert because I like it to affect the outside rather than the inside rather than the outside. So what I like to do here, or I could also invert it and first do the other way around. So if I invert this and I move the exposure down, you will see a radial filter with my model in the middle that is not affected. So what I will do now is I will reduce the exposure of the picture just a tiny bit, reduce the contrast or give it a little bit more contrast, and I will play around to just affect the picture and make my model stand out more. And this is something that really, with a lot of fidgeting and just trying out things, will get you the results that you want. So it's really just trial and error. And I also like to reduce the colors in the background here. So this is when I remove the saturation. And if you see here, you have a feather. Now, if you remove the feather, then you will see that it's really a circle around your model. And if you up it, then you will see that it starts to give a sort of blurry edge. Here in your tiny preview, you can see that this is still too much. So you can really see that I've been editing and working on this picture. So what I like to do most of the time is just enlarge this a little bit and just move it around depending on how I like it to look. I like it to follow the lines of the model, of course. But like this, it looks less fake, less as if I've edited too much on the picture. So if we go to the before and after right now, you can really see that this filter has affected my picture a lot and that it has made my model stand out even more. So as you can see, before and after. The next thing that I would like to do is to give her face some more clarity. So I again go to the Radial filter. You could also do this with a brush. It depends what you prefer doing. So now I'm going to invert it. I'm going to up the exposure on my model's face. I'm gonna give her a tiny bit more contrast, a tiny bit more highlights, less shadows, more whites, and less blacks. And then I wanna give her a little bit more saturation so that you can really see that she stands out. And I think that's it. So I'm currently already happy with how this is looking, but I want her hair to be really more colorful. So what I'm going to do now is use another layer on top of this and just go over it. Now I'm not going to go into exposure. I'm going to go here into color. And right now I'm going to put a red layer over it. So right now you can see that this is really red. If you want to reduce the opacity of this, you can just reduce it here and it will change the color and how it's being applied to your picture. Now, because of the exposure, it looks really weird. So I'm just gonna go and look what looks okay for me visually. So you can still play around here with the contrast, the shadows, etc. You can also saturate the color a bit more, which is what I'm gonna do. Now this looks really weird because I'm looking at the picture from so close up. So if we go back here and I zoom out, you can actually see that I've intensified the red, but it doesn't look as fake, or at least in my opinion it doesn't. If you think it does look weird, then just go back to your filter, make sure it's the right one that you're applying, and maybe just play around with the things that you've done if you can't change them. Now, I know my model doesn't mind me doing all of these changes to her, but some models don't appreciate that you change their hair color or intensify it or whatever. So it really depends on what type of edit you're going for. Now, this is pretty much this picture the way I want it, more or less, of course. I'm still gonna go look into vignetting. Why I love having heavy vignetting on my pictures, so I always go for the heavy one. And if you look at the picture, it really makes the model stand out even more, but I think right now it's too much. So what I'm gonna do is I go to non-vignetting and I just look at the vignetting options that you have. And if you don't like them, so I go back to none, then you can add this yourself. For example, I feel like from this side I want a little more shadows, so I go again here into exposure, I reduce the exposure and I manually do this. So this is a manual way of kind of vignetting your picture. Again, if I want to adjust, for example, this one that has upped the exposure even a little more to give her more contrast, I can also do this. So you can always go back to the changes that you've done, and that's the big advantage I find in Lightroom. Now, I personally really like the way this picture is looking right now. I think she looks super cool. The only thing that I find is that I'm missing a bit of contrast. So I know previously here we went into my filters. So if I click on this one, double check with O to see if it's exactly the one that I want. I'm gonna go see if I can't, by upping the exposure just a little bit, make the details come back. If that's not the case, which is not here, I will just create a new brush. So I click on new, I go over her feet and legs here, but I don't want to affect the top part too much because I think the top part kind of looks, at least the head looks the way I want it, and I don't want to overwork this picture either. So right now I've upped the exposure way too much on it, so I go down a little bit. And then what I also like to do, if I can, is just to erase any bits that look weird. Now you can do this in the red version of this, but I like doing it like this as well because you can immediately see the effect and how it applies. So here around the shoe we had this little blurry area here as well. So I just like to take those away until it looks good to me. That's it. So I think this is how I'm gonna leave the picture. I think it looks really good. I'm super happy with it. So if we look again at the before and after, you can really see that I've worked on this picture, but I don't think it looks fake in any way. Also, I didn't use any Photoshop on this picture, so it's not like I've modified the way my model looks or changed the curves of her body, etc. So now what you want to do is export your picture. So we're going to go to export, and as you can see, I have presets in here already. So if you want to export, you can export to desktop if you want, but I like to do it in a specific folder, or if you do same folder as original photo, that is what I like to do. I change this to edit. I change the name to edit, and then I will rename it to a custom name. So I will call this, because the model's name is Lisa, I will call it Lisa. I will have it start with the number 1 so that I know it is the first picture of Lisa. Now you can also put a dash in between or whatever, or you can custom name with original file number, custom name sequence. And custom name sequence is the one that I use most. You can make this video, you can change the image file settings. So what I like to do is I like to limit my file size to 2500. Why? Because that's most websites' largest image. You can also resize it to fit. For example, if you want the dimensions not to be over 1000 by 1000 or how many pixels per inch or whatever you want, you can also sharpen it for screen. If I do this, I will do this on high. You can keep the metadata of your picture or you can remove it. I personally remove this. You can put in a watermark. So I will do my own logo. I have multiple versions in here. And after export, you can show the file, open another application, etc. So I'm going to do show in Explorer. And now I'm going to export the picture. So normally, right now, it's exporting the picture. You can see this in the top left corner. And if the bar is completely full, like this, then you will see your picture. Now, I'm not sure if I've used my correct watermark. I apparently didn't. So, file, export. And if you want to make your own watermark, the best way to do this is to actually go into your watermarks. I'm gonna see which one I am using here. And I have a lot of tests and I should clean this up, I know it. So my simple logo, Kathy, is actually the one that I like to use. And you can at all times change the opacity, the fit, so if I want it to be smaller, etc. So right now I'm gonna make it a 10. I'm gonna have this the way it already was, save. I'm gonna call this, I don't know, preset Kathy logo. I should really clean up my presets, by the way. So I do create and then I do export. Because I've already exported it a previous time with the wrong logo on it, I'm gonna overwrite it and then it will export the picture again. Now the advantage of Lightroom is that I can always go back and adjust it even more, go back into the different types of editing I've done. But there we go. This is the picture that I've edited and the way it looks right now. I think it looks super cool. I am really happy with it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and this is where I'm gonna end it. This is how I personally use Lightroom to edit my pictures. I hope this was helpful and that you've learned how to work with the program a little bit. And if you want to learn how to work differently with Lightroom, if you really want to get into the basics, I would recommend checking out Skillshare. It's personally where I find most of the online classes that I take, and it is also there that I found lots of specific tutorials how to get certain effects in your pictures. So I could highly recommend them, and if you use my link in the description box, I think you will get 1 month for free, but I'm not exactly sure. And no, this video is not sponsored by Skillshare in any way, shape or form. I just genuinely love their platform. Give this video a big thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know in the comments what you think of how I edit my pictures. Is it the style that you like or not? Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I make new videos every week and I would love to hear for every single one of them. Before we end the video, of course, I want to thank my patrons, and more specifically Jerry and Anders, my high tier patrons, for supporting my channel. Thank you so much, it means the world to me. And of course, to each and every one of you watching my videos, thank you so much, and I will see you next week with a new video. Bye!